ecosystems in the arid heart and studied the growth and productivity of cooler temperate forests. All this work has been underpinned by a desire to support rural and regional livelihoods while simultaneously better managing our natural resources. In recent years, he has focused on the integration of environmental knowledge using natural capital accounting and is currently working with primary producers, forestry companies and the resources sector with the aim of building capability in natural capital accounting across Australia. Please join me in welcoming Anthony. It looks like a very flighty remote, so I should have a try first, Anthony. Right. And we'll take your time. We'll go through into Smoko.
This one here?
This one here.
Okay. Great. Yeah. Thanks. Good luck. That's a great way to start a talk, isn't it? Thanks, Matt. I'll start off by acknowledging the Yawuru people, their elders past and present, and thank them for having me on their country. I'd also like to thank the organising committee for having me here today, particularly Matt and Ian Watson, who have given me the opportunity to escape a Tasmanian winter and top up my vitamin D levels here in sunny Broome. And lastly, I'd like to acknowledge my team. I mean, I am the person up here talking, but you're only as good as your team, and I've got a fantastic team, and the work that we've done that I hope we're presenting today is a combination of many years of work and hard work on their part. So really what I want to do today is just give a little bit of an introduction to this concept of natural capital. And there'll be three terms you'll hear quite often around the place, and that's natural capital accounting, and natural capital assessment. There's nothing new about natural capital. In fact, many of you probably know more about natural capital than me. You're actively managing it every day. And it's really just the stocks of the renewable and non-renewable resources that we use, and these renewable resources can be considered as ecosystems themselves. And these stocks of resources and ecosystems produce the environmental services that provide the basis for evaluation of the underlying ecosystem assets. And I think, the term natural capital is a deliberate choice of words. It's really designed to help us recognise the fact that the underlying ecosystem resources or the ecosystems themselves should be treated as assets because they produce these benefits that we all, they produce these ecosystem services that we all benefit from. And so natural capital accounting then is just simply the process of measuring those stocks, measuring the ecosystem services and valuing those stocks, those ecosystem services. And so valuation, when we talk about valuation here, it can be, it's a much broader concept than just a simple monetary valuation. The other thing that you'll hear a lot of, particularly lately, is the term natural capital assessment. And in many respects is very similar to the process of natural capital accounting, but it has a slightly different focus. So in a natural capital assessment, an organisation or an individual might be starting to understand how their actions or their management actions are impacting on natural capital, or how their organisation might depend on that natural capital. And the reason for doing that is really about understanding the risks that disruptions to that natural capital can pose for the organisation. And so it's really designed to support decision making and help an organisation to identify the mitigating activities to address disruptions to natural capital, or help them to identify new opportunities in the future. So, and here we go again. Just a quick. Damn. We'll get there. No. Yeah. Don't touch it. All right. And so why does it matter? So nature is now a material issue for many businesses. And I think there have been two mark reviews in this perspective. The first was the Stern review in 2000 that really set itself up to examine the risks that climate change are going to cause to the global economic system. In 2021, the Discovery took on a challenge that really started to hack that global financial system faces ongoing nature and the loss of diversity. You know, may have heard quite these two. Headline is over half of global or moderate on nature, and so there's been a focus, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, and how to go about addressing nature and try to start the curve on this. And so, you know, the COP15 agreed to reach a target of no net loss of no further loss of nature by 2030 against a 2020 baseline. And so it's a very ambitious task, and so it's going to be a difficult challenge to meet. And so on the back of that, there's been a proliferation of initiatives, frameworks, measurement protocols and things like that. And so, you know, for many, it really is just an acronym soup. And so I think, you know, but, you know, there's a, you know, for someone stepping into the natural capital space, it can be quite an overwhelming space and quite a confusing space. And so there's a real need to start to think about, well, how do all these different pieces come together? And so this is a slide that I stole from the TNFD, the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. And it's one that I've adapted because I didn't think that it was quite complete. And so at a high level, we have the Convention on Biological Diversity and the United Nations Convention on Climate Change, setting these broad global targets for society to meet, you know, keep temperatures to below 1.5 degrees Celsius and reverse this loss of nature. But they've also realised that governments can't do this alone, and so there's been a real focus on energising the private sector to take responsibility for the challenge. And so what you'll see in many of the initiatives that were on the previous slide, it really comes down to 4 or 5 main key factors. And it starts with an understanding of an organisation's impacts on natural capital and their dependencies on natural capital, and using that information to better understand the risks that disruptions to that supply of natural capital might cause for the organisation going forward. Not only the risk, and so that provides a basis then to start to formulate how we're going to identify the mitigations required to address these challenges and what further opportunities are there for us to shift the levers and change management so that we can address that. But what wasn't in the TNFD work was that underlying this, you know, is an information system that can be well supported by a well-constructed set of environmental accounts. And I think bringing that together in a simple way hopefully will help to address some of the confusion that's out there in the market at the moment. And so accounting is really just you know, if we think about environmental accounting, it has a lot of characteristics that we see in existing financial accounting. So the concepts of double entry bookkeeping are all through the environmental accounting space as well. And so really they're just information systems to help us structure and bring together a whole range of different data sets and information on our transactions with the environment. And so our hypothesis is that if we can more formally integrate financial accounting with environmental accounting, we'll get a much stronger indication of nature's contributions to the economy. Or more simply put, nature's an asset, and we need to start thinking of nature as an asset. But existing accounting standards really are missing a large part of the pie. So this is a sort of conceptual model of a farm, and we can see, you know, some natural capital is already captured in the agricultural accounting standards. That's the livestock and the plants and things like that. And other assets on the farm, like the property and plant equipment, are also well catered for in terms of existing accounting standards. But nature creates lots of benefits and services. And so the challenge for us is then, how do we bring in these additional assets, the underlying soils, the water, the ecosystems, the shelter belts, or the remnant vegetation? How do we recognise those in a set of formula accounting? And that's really quite important, because we know that the ecosystem services that these produce have both private benefits for the landowners, but also a broader societal benefit. And so really, natural capital accounting is all about just making those ecosystems, the underlying ecosystem assets, visible, and recognising the benefits that they provide to the enterprise. think I've lost the slide. All right. And so, the accounting model itself is actually quite simple. It consists of 4 steps. It's actually classifying and identifying the ecosystem assets that are on your property, and that usually involves some sort of mapping and detailed mapping of your ecosystems and your other assets on the farm. Measuring the condition of those assets, and it's that combination of asset extent, or the stock of assets, and the condition of those assets that give us an understanding of the capacity of those ecosystems to produce the ecosystem services that are inputs into our businesses. And so, and typically those ecosystem services can be provisioning services. So, for many of you here, it might be livestock production or fodder production. They can be the regulating services that Beverly was talking about before, the role of these ecosystems in sequestering carbon and managing climate change. And then, or they could be more cultural services as well. So the enjoyment that we receive from nature, the spiritual benefits that we receive from nature. And so the accounting system helps us start to quantify those values and start to bring them together in a structured and organised way. But I just broke your pointer. But it's a lot of work. So, when we started out on this journey, we asked ourselves, well, what's the value proposition for this? Extending the existing accounting standards is a big ask for anyone. And so we spent a lot of time speaking to a whole range of stakeholders around what they perceive the value proposition for natural capital accounting to be. And we came into that with, I suppose, a preconceived idea that if private enterprise is going to adopt natural capital accounting, there has to be a real bang for buck in that. And so the three sort of main drivers that were floating around at the time were that there would be you would attract premium prices for your produce. There would be a lot of the banks were getting on board at the time, and there was a lot of talk around discounted finance for good stewards of natural capital, and of course the ever-present environmental markets. Would we be able to help provide the information in a structured and organised way to help people engage more fully in environmental markets? But what we found from possibly over about 200 interviews was that really the main drivers were actually were more about the organisation's environmental stewardship of its assets, ensuring that the organisation could maintain market access, and using the accounting system in the way it's designed to be able to pull the levers internally to adjust their management and ensure that the allocation of capital to environmental management was done effectively and efficiently. But there were some surprises in there as well. One of the key things that came up all the time was around the organisation's reputation. And they wanted to be, and that was about wanting to be seen as an employer of choice and quite a proactive employer. And so really about building that social capital around the organization. So it was surprising how the sort of economic drivers were mentioned way less than we were actually expecting. So, but really underlying theme, really developing robust, transparent the organisation on natural capital it has under management. But a job. So up on Summit is that working on in Tasmania and spare you the pain through 15 data. But what I want to pull is, if we think from an aspect, we need to bring information in on the extent of the ecosystems, the land use of those ecosystems, the carbon and greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with those management actions, the biodiversity outcomes that are occurring on the farm, your soil health, the water use, and climate as well. And so what it is a massive lot of information that's really highly spatially explicit. It's not, but not only spatially explicit, it's temporally explicit as well. And so for any organisation, that's a major challenge. Even for us still in CSIRO pulling this together, it's still a major undertaking. And so, but I do think there's a real opportunity, and it's just on our doorstep to actually make this happen in a cheap and effective way. And I think that's probably one of the the big thing, it's almost a responsibility on us, because we have to make this, if this is going to become something that is mainstream, we have to make it accessible. It has to be, affordable, and it has to be robust. And so it can't be something that just a few wealthy organisations do. We need to make it open access and something that all organisations can work on. And so we are currently working on systems to help do that. And I do believe that within the next probably 3 to 5 years, we'll be able to start to deliver really high resolution spatial information in a way that is meaningful for the use in accounts. But of course, that still leaves us with one challenge. How do we present so much information in a coherent and consistent manner? And so the approach that we've been experimenting with is borrowed directly from existing accounting standards and the concept of general financial reporting. And so what we've found is that we can start to express all this information on ecosystem accounts in a way similar to, in a way and structure similar to what we see in general purpose financial accounting. And so what we're working with at the moment are 3 key natural capital statements. So a natural capital balance sheet, which is analogous to a financial balance sheet. An ecosystem change statement, which is analogous to the cash flow statement that you see in financial reports, and talks about the changes in the operating position of the company between 2 balance periods, and a natural capital profit and loss statement, which is analogous to the income statement that we see, which starts to record the flows of ecosystem services in and out of the business during the accounting period. And so this is what we've seen so far, is that this approach is working quite well for a bunch of for any organisation that we've worked with. And so we currently work with individual farmers, forestry companies, right through to big ASX listed companies as well. But it doesn't capture the full scope of the problem, because many of the impacts and dependencies that an organisation has falls outside the operational boundaries often falls outside of the operational boundaries of the organisation. And so what we've had to develop is another 3 statements that are shown there on the impact statement, the dependency statement, and the risks and opportunity statements. And this is specifically designed to respond to the growing disclosure requirements that are being driven by the Task Force for Climate-related Financial Disclosures and the Task Force for Nature-related Financial Disclosures. So I was going to show you some of these statements, but they're very hard to present in an interesting way. So, but what I do want to say is that what we have spent a lot of time is around developing guidance materials to help people build their capacity and to try and show people in a real way how this information comes down, this really dense information data set comes down into some quite succinct natural capital statements. And so we have one for the forestry sector at the moment. I'm currently just developing one for the resources sector, and later this week I think the one in the middle will be launched as part of a more general guidance material to natural capital accounting and how and some of our thinking in this space. But importantly, what we're seeing is companies starting to adopt this. So earlier in the year, BHP released their peanut pilot accounts, which was an operating mine in Western Australia, and I'm fortunate to work with a company, a forestry company in Tasmania called Foraco, who are now up to their 3rd natural capital report. And so we're seeing quite a lot of enthusiasm from corporates to adopt this, because they understand the language of profit and loss statements, balance sheets, and income statements. And so I'm going to leave it there, but I do want to just reflect on the diversity of collaborators we've had over this journey. And when I was pulling this slide together, and I'm probably going to have to apologise to a few of our partners, because I'm pretty sure I'll have left some off. But what it demonstrates is there's just been right across the sector, particularly land-based sectors, there's been a massive amount of interest and urgency around trying to adopt the natural capital accounting approach, adopt natural capital accounting more broadly. And so, and it's only been, I thought it might level off at some point, but it just seems to be getting hotter and hotter the whole time. So, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Tony. And once again, Tony's going to be with us to the conference end, so there'll be plenty of time for questions over the next few and a half days. Tony, come in a bit under time, so we've got a good few minutes for some questions. So please put your hand up if you've got a question for Tony, and we'll get a microphone.
Try and save you some time.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tony. Richard Marver, Contour Consulting. Really comprehensive presentation on the sort of data capture methods and how we actually record the data that we capture when we're doing natural capital accounting. But I guess an even more complex question that I have is around how we start to assign value to that data. What do we value a jarrah forest versus a spinifex grassland as far as how it's performing and behaving? And in my experience, everybody's got a different value on species versus ecosystems and other things. So is there research and kind of work being done towards standardising an approach to placing value on different things? And, when we start to see these BHP reports, we can actually say with confidence, yes, they're performing well, or no, they're not?
Yeah, it's a really good, and I think it's a really important question. So the way the valuation is currently constructed in ecosystem accounting is a very narrow lens, and that narrow lens is specifically designed. When you think about the history of how it's come together, the environmental accounting that's outlined in things like the SIA is really designed to support the system of national accounts, and so they have some strict approaches to the valuation problem, and for very sound reasons for doing that. I think there is an opportunity to take a broader perspective on valuation within an organisational context. But again, I think that we're just going to have to be very careful that we don't get into an area where we start double counting and things like that. But yeah, it's definitely going to be an active area of research over the next probably 5 or 6 years in sort of bringing in not only a monetary valuation perspective, but other valuation perspectives into the accounts. But I think there's still some way to go in solving that challenge, for sure.
Thank you.
Robin Cowley, Primary Industries NT. I don't even know if it's related, but it made me wonder, is this relevant to the potential for property values to be linked to land condition? And, do you see that as being an incentive for places and ever actually being implemented in reality?
Have to tread carefully here, right? Because I'd imagine yes, and I think to some extent land condition is sort of maybe somewhat subjectively incorporated in property valuations anyway, and so it might actually help us to put some more rigour around some of that. I think that's definitely on the cards. I've been approached by a number of land valuers over the journey, and they're all sort of thinking about that land valuation perspective. So I think it's definitely something that's possible, but I think we've still got some way to go before that gets incorporated more formally.
Hi, Nini Mills here. Just expanding or extending on the question that was asked previously around, additional value aspects that should be considered as part of the methodology. Yaru, one of our research projects in collaboration with ANU is in advancing environmental accounting methodology, importantly applying the cultural foundation. So you mentioned briefly that element by way of cultural spiritual aspects. But is there any tangible ways thus far, noting that you've already said there's an opportunity to expand on the methodology, is there any tangible ways by which the traditional ecological knowledge aspects and customary values as perceived by Aboriginal people incorporated in anything that you've shared?
Yeah, it is a good question, and I've seen snippets of the work that ANU have been doing. Look, I can't say there's a tangible way forward at the moment, but I do think, you know, one of my team members is an accountant, right, and she'll tell me if you can measure it, I can account for it. And so I think if you can come up with that approach and start to present, there's nothing to stop you presenting a number of different perspectives on valuation right now. You know, if you can outline your methodology and make it clear what you're doing, actually, I don't see any real barriers to that. I think the thing that we have to be careful of in terms of the way this valuation works is, you know, ideally, you know, we've gone down the path we have because we have an explicit goal that we want to bring the financial accounts and the natural capital accounts together more formally, and so there'll be strict rules in terms of how that integration occurs. But in terms of bringing in other perspectives and using the accounts to present those other perspectives and values, you know, I don't see any bounds on that at all. So. Sure.
Don Burnside, Tony. Thank you very much. I gather from reading of the popular press in recent times that the Federal Treasurer is starting to think about a parallel set of accounts for how the government reports budgets and GDP, etc., etc. Are you operating in that sort of area at all?
Not me personally, but people within my group are. So in Surrey, we're coming at this from the two perspectives. So obviously the federal government has a national strategy around environmental accounting, and all the states and governments have signed up to that. And so people within my program are actually working on that on the national accounting perspective, and we're coming at it from a bottom-up perspective in my team and in our group, and I think there's a real power in coming at it from those both perspectives, because we'll get a much richer vision and picture of sort of the natural capital and its contributions to enterprises from a bottom-up scale, and then we can start to constrain that with the sort of top-down piece. But I think I think you need both to come at it, and it's definitely happening. So I think that was my last loud question. So.
Thanks very much, Anthony. Can we please put our hands together? Sorry, mate. Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks very much. That's the end of the morning's plenary session. Can we just put our hands together one more time for all the presenters? That was great. After morning tea, concurrent sessions will begin. Concurrent session number 1 on traditional land use and management will be in the semi-room up the back. Concurrent session number 2, coming to grips with carbon, natural capital, will be here in the Jimmy Chai Hall. We'll reconvene in 20 minutes. Thank you very much.